Thank you all for coming today, and this for us is the end of actually quite a long process of thinking, preparing, researching, networking and collaborating with other people, all of whom have in common a core conviction that alternatives to the present are possible and that we have much more choices as to how we manage this crisis than our political leaders would have us allow. Claiming Our Future has been in existence since 2010, and we're basically a social movement, a network of individuals and organisations who are committed to making the case that an alternative, fairer, more caring Ireland is possible. We work out of a value basis of 5 core values from which we draw our policy inspiration, and that's equality, sustainability, solidarity, participation and accountability. And what we're saying to the government clearly is we want those values to inform our policy making and our budget strategies. We're here today because we believe we can create a more hopeful, alternative way of framing the choices that there are before us. We've had a number of national seminars right around the country where hundreds of people have turned up to discuss these issues of equality, sustainability, solidarity. And we've had a campaign group who's been working from before last year to pin down the arguments, the facts, the statistics that we'll show you today that show an alternative way of framing the next budget as possible. So I think our timing is very opposite. We saw in yesterday's Sunday Business Post, in today's Irish Times, that kites are being flown already about the next budget. And this is our argument for that budget, which argues really clearly that there's another way, another perspective that needs to be put on the national debate and argued fairly and loudly that an alternative spec is possible. So I'm going to hand over to Rory Hearne now from Claiming Our Future, who's going to outline the basic premise of the plan and what's behind it in its analysis. Thanks, Rory.
Okay, thanks, Mary. And thanks to everybody for coming along today. What we've outlined today, and you can see it in our leaflet which we've produced and which we will be distributing around the country. We're producing thousands of those leaflets, is essentially a point that we feel that our society and our economy is at its worst crisis since independence. Austerity clearly isn't working. And we have to challenge the mantra that there are no alternatives to the current and planned austerity programme. There is a figure outlined of 3.5 billion of possible tax increases and cuts due to come in this December's budget, and a potential up to 9 billion between now and 2015. What we're starting today is we want to start a national debate about the alternatives. We're here outlining our Plan B, which includes a number of alternatives. We want to raise awareness that there are credible alternatives there, which make sense both socially and economically. We want this discussion to go into people's families, into their homes, into their workplaces, into the media and into communities. Now is the time to get involved. Now is the time for people to start asking questions of their politicians, because the decisions we all know will be made over the next few months, and then we'll see the circus in the months of November running up to the budget, but the decisions will have been made. Now is the time for people to get involved in that. Our Plan B essentially has 5 key components. The first is a state-led investment programme, which would create growth, jobs and economic activity. The second is raising revenue from taxes on wealth and higher incomes. The third is to maintain spending on essential public and community services, particularly for the vulnerable and their communities. The fourth is protecting low-income households, which would boost domestic demand. And the final one is raising additional resources through debt write-down. Now, there is more detail in the leaflet and on our website in these policies, and we only have a short amount of time this morning, so I won't go through them in too much detail. The essential core point we feel is that if the government invested up to 3 billion a year for the next 5 years, a 15 billion state-led investment stimulus, it could create tens of thousands of jobs, which would reduce the need for spending on welfare. It would create employment, which raises taxes from income. It stimulates economic growth, and this is a way in which reduces the deficit. In terms of the unemployment crisis, we have to name it. It is now at the same level it was in 1984. We are in the 1980s. We have to say stop. We have to address this crisis, particularly for young people. There's a 30% youth unemployment rate. Every month, 3,000 people are leaving this country. Most families have been touched by unemployment or emigration. We have to say enough is enough. As I said, is a stimulus program which would involve investment in a number of key areas. For example, bringing hospitals up to world-class standards, a school building program, the regeneration of social housing estates, and supporting indigenous investment in private companies that could be world leaders in IT, digital communications, and green areas. We have the funds to invest in this, and this is a key point we need to counter. There is over 5 billion in the pension reserve fund. There is cash reserves. Private pensions could be directed to invest in these areas. We've invested 20 billion. We've put 20 billion of taxpayers' money into the AIB. The AIB should be directed much more clearly to give out much more loans to private companies and potentially in other areas investment. In terms of the other area, it is vital, and we are calling for the maintaining of public expenditure on welfare, on key public and community services. These services, those on the lower incomes, cannot take any more cuts. The positive developments and services that were built up during the Celtic Tiger are being unravelled. We are now hollowing out the social infrastructure, the social fabric of our communities, our families and our society. We believe that Plan B is the sensible option. It is economically counterproductive to be further cutting welfare, to be cutting lower and middle income people. They are the ones who spend the money domestically in this country. It is economically counterproductive and it is morally wrong. We are calling for progressive taxation to fund public services, that is, taxes on higher incomes. There is people in this country who are choosing between putting hot meals on the table and deciding whether to buy a winter jacket for their child in this coming school year. There is other people who are deciding whether to go on 1 holiday or 3 holidays this year. We believe that those at the top can pay a bigger burden and a bigger share than they are currently paying. To finish then, in terms of our main points today, is what we are saying is that it is, when it came to paying the bondholders, as we're seeing again another 1.1 billion going out this week, and bailing out the financial system, they are to be paid whatever the cost. We are asking, why is the same approach an effort not put into the creation of employment, to avoid emigration, to support our families and to address poverty? It is wrong to use the emigration of our educated young as an excuse and a pressure release. It is wrong that tens of thousands of children remain in dire poverty and that the issues of disadvantage of communities are not addressed. We are making the point and launching Plan B today to point out that if enough people in this country ask for alternatives, if they get involved and inform themselves, we believe the political system can be changed and can be influenced to change direction. Plan B is about giving people hope. It's about pointing out there are alternatives. We're encouraging you to get involved. We have a petition set up on our website that people can show their support. We will be organising public meetings across the country over the coming months between now and the budget. And as I said, our main point is today there are alternatives and the current direction is morally and economically wrong. Thank you.
Thank you, Rory.